book. If you ever want to read a book from the day, go get this book, A Brilliant Solution. The next day was a beautiful day. We go fishing in the bay, and then the next day, here came Hurricane Dennis, barreling down right over the top of towards the same hotel, and they evacuate the town. Vacation's cut short, so we head back to Texas. Now, a couple of weeks later, and this is the year of the hurricane, you guys might remember this, here comes Hurricane Katrina, and it devastates the Gulf Coast in Louisiana, and y'all still remember the pictures of that. And then 3 weeks later, here comes Hurricane Rita, the biggest Category 5 storm ever known to man, bearing down on the city of Houston. My dad picks up the phone one morning. He lives in Houston. He calls me and says, "Hey, son, I need to get out of town. I'm going to come to Austin." Is that right? I said, "Of course, Dad, coming up." His wife calls me at noon and says, "Tim, you need to come to town. Your dad just had a heart attack." So I take off. I drive into town. So I'm driving into Houston. 2 million people are driving in and out. I get to see the doctor. And he just kind of looked at me and shook his head. And, says, "Son, I don't think there's much we can do. We need to watch this for a couple of days, but it doesn't look good. But right now, the hurricane's coming. You need to get out of town." Normally, it's about a 3-hour drive back to Austin. In the traffic, I was now behind 4 million people. It took 24 and a half hours to drive to Austin. I get home that day, that evening. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I turned on the TV. Hurricane Rita had started to turn. The next day, it turns completely. Not a drop of rain falls on my father's house. And then the next day I have to drive back down and turn the machines off of my father. And it was just that kind of year where everything you can imagine is going wrong, one thing after the next, after the next. And then I don't remember quite the timing of this, but it was a couple of weeks later. I was out, we have a little lake house out on Lake Travis, west of Austin. And I was looking for a plug, and I had this little shed. And it's one of these sheds kind of out in the tall grass and weeds. And if you ever to see that, at least in Texas, when you look at that, you say, there's probably snakes in that shed. So you can imagine my feelings and fears towards snakes. And I would walk over making as much noise as I could possibly make. And I go to this shed, and I'm kind of sneaking in, and kind of going in, and I have these 3 boxes full of stuff, plumbing supplies and electrical supplies, what have you. And I kick the boxes, shake the boxes, move the boxes. I go through all these, and I start digging in the box, and all of a sudden, I kind of hear this rattlesnake, and I kind of pull my head slowly out of the box, and there right in front of me is a rattlesnake, staring face to face right in the eyes. And I just remember saying, God, this is just too much. Well, the short version of the story is I'm looking at this, I'm thinking it's like 4 feet away, they can't jump that far, so I jump backwards, I'm running to get the shotgun, I come, put an end to that snake. That should happen to every snake as far as I'm concerned. But it was just that kind of year where everything that could possibly go wrong is going wrong. And I think it was the next day, I don't remember the exact timing, but I'm sitting in the truck and that poll came on. It's a poll that we all hear over and over again. It says that 85% of us disapprove of the job Congress is doing, yet 95% of all incumbents get reelected every 2 years. And I just kind of went off in a way that I really would never do. And my son was sitting in the truck next to me, and after I finished venting, he kind of looked up at me and he said, "Hey, Dad, you're supposed to be a smart guy. You tell us not to complain about this stuff. Why don't you go fix it?" And what I was complaining about was this massively out-of-control government. It was back in 2005. I was fed up with it, and I kind of just sat back and listened, and I said, he's got a point. Now, you have to understand my background. I'm not a political guy at all. I'm a computer guy. I've got a computer science degree from the University of Texas. I've worked on spy satellite systems for Texas Instruments. I worked at a company where we built the first credit card readers to the gas pump. I worked over at Dell for 12 years. And all my life, what I've done is use technology to build computer systems to change the way we do things. That's who I am. That's what I've done all of my career. And as I started thinking about this problem, why so many of us are so fed up with what's going on in Washington, I approached how would you solve this problem, not from a political perspective, but from a computer and a systems perspective. And in the systems world, when you want to solve a problem, you don't just look at what the problem is, you try to make sure you understand what the root cause of the problem is. And I said the root cause here is a little complicated, but it really comes down to the fact that we have politicians in Washington. We no longer have representatives. The people that are up there, they don't represent you or I anymore. They represent the political party. They represent the special interest groups that fund them, and they represent their own career long before they think of you and I. So I thought of the problem for this perspective, and I said, if we could come up with a system to hire and elect representatives in a way that addressed those 3 fundamental problems, maybe, just maybe, we could get this nation back on track. So as I sat there, and my son issued that challenge, and I'm laying in bed, and I'm thinking about this problem night after night, and just kind of flipping over, how would you go about solving this problem? How can we retake control of our government? It all came to me one night. And it goes back to, you remember that book that that lady insisted that I read in Florida? It was called A Brilliant Solution, about the writing of the Constitution. And as I sat there and I read that book, it inspired me. And I started reading about all the words of our founding fathers. I read Franklin's biography, and I read about Thomas Jefferson, the Federalist Papers, and I read Thomas Paine's Common Sense. I read Tocqueville's Democracy in America and 5,000-Year Leap, and just book after book. I was consuming these books, and somewhere in there I came across this quote. It's from Samuel Adams, and I hope you can hear me when this comes across clearly. But listen to this quote. It's around 1776. He said, "If ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in our government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin." And when I read that quote, I said, he's talking directly to you and I. They knew this day would come. They were brilliant men, and they created the greatest form of government because they knew this day would come. And when I say that, I'm talking about this government that we have. Think about how it's structured. We have the executive branch and the judiciary, but then we have the legislative branch. Two bodies, the Senate, the seasoned elder statesmen, but then the House, who are meant to be the true citizen representatives, where every single seat comes up for vote every 2 years. And I contend that they created the government in this fashion so that when this day came, this day that we're living right now, and vain aspiring men have taken control, we, the experienced patriots, can go and remove every single one of them, one day, one election, and that's what they intended. And then if you think about this, you just say, how would that be possible? How could we possibly do it? Now, you remember the snake story I told, and I was 22 years, and I was hunting in the hills of Texas, and I was walking through, and I kind of had my rifle, and I was about to step on this massive wad of rattlesnakes. What happened next happened so fast, I can hardly remember it, but it went so quick. Let me just explain it. I had my rifle, I kind of swung, leaning across my left knee. I'm stepping forward, my left foot is up, stepping down, it's about to step about 12 inches in front of these snakes. I swung my rifle forward. To this day, I don't remember switching from safety to fire. I pulled the trigger, and I shot and killed what turned out to be 2 mating rattlesnakes. 1 bullet, 1 shot. One of them was 5'9", one of them was 5'6". They were bigger around than my arm. But in 1 shot, both of those snakes went. And as I was laying in bed that night, thinking about this problem, thinking about the book the lady had given me, thinking about this quote, it all came to me. That's exactly what our founding fathers intended. Not to shoot the politicians, don't get me wrong, but on one day, one election, to remove these two parties. And I would contend that the two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, are no different than the male and female gender of the rattlesnake species. They get together once a year, they go through this little ritual, and they do their thing, and they go off. But lo and behold, nobody better ever tread on them. And as I sat there and I thought about this problem, and I said, we need to do something different, I came up with this GO system. And the GO system was designed to replace all 435 members of the United States House of Representatives, one day, one election, because I believe that's what our founding fathers intended. Now again, I agree that there are a few good people out there, but we didn't want to sit here, I didn't want to sit here and try to pick and choose who those good people were. What I said was, when 85% of us disapprove of Congress, yet 95% of these incumbents get reelected year after year after year, there's got to be something wrong. And so the GO system is designed to address this very problem, to let us hire true citizen representatives, to let us hire people that will not be responsible to a party, but that are responsible to the people of their district, people who will not have accepted special interest money, and people who are not there to serve their own political career. And I created this GO system. So let me explain to you how this system works, and then we'll do little questions, and you can tell me if you think we could really do something like this. So GO is designed to get to 500,000